Show of hands, how many of you had read Atomic Habits by James Clear? That's a pretty good number. If you have not, I would suggest it. But basically what he talks about is making these little incremental changes. And Ken just hit on that about making those little bitty changes, 1 to 3, 5% all the time on the little things that maybe you could easily deduce or take away, right? And so whether you're personally or professionally, if you can do something a little bit more, you can really find a lot more value. And I like that 1 + 1 + 1. Not to be confused with my book of the sum of 4. So next we're going to bring up the CEO of PMP. And I was able to actually sit down with Kyle for just a second. And if you guys read his bio, it's interesting. When I read Skydance, not only because in my acting career, I thought for some reason Skynet. Who could name what Skynet is? Anybody? Terminator, I love it, right? So we're about to have the Terminator come up right now and speak to us on marketing maturity. But everybody, please put your hands together for Kyle Hebenstreit.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Blue. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, team at PILMMA, for putting this on, and thank you all for being here. Looking forward to chatting with you today. But I'm calling an audible. The title was Marketing Maturity. However, we just did a market research project that I think is really interesting and of value to discuss with you today. So I'm going to talk more about the findings there and the insights there because I think there are going to be some practical learnings. Some are going to align with some of the stuff you've already heard, and a lot of it's going to be net new. The concept, as we're calling it, is the buying process waterfall. But before I get into that, I just want to introduce myself and PMP so you have context for what I'm going to tell you later on in the discussion. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana originally. I'm the son of a judge and an attorney. A love of movies took me to Los Angeles. I studied film and business at USC. And then as Blue mentioned, I spent the lion's share of my time in LA working at a company called Skydance Media, which has been in headlines recently because they're potentially going to acquire Paramount Pictures. But while I was there, we produced movies like Mission Impossible and Star Trek Into Darkness and World War Z and, in fact, Terminator, Genesis. So I was more in a creative role, but I fell in love with the business side of Skydance and learned a lot operating underneath the CEO and wanted to pursue a career that was more entrepreneurial. So I got my MBA at Indiana University at the Kelley School of Business, and then I pursued opportunities with Deloitte's consulting practice based out of Chicago. And there aren't a ton of media people at Deloitte, so I got put on all the media projects, which was super interesting. I worked on the AT&T Time Warner merger, how we can use consumer data to improve content. I worked on the Time Meredith merger, and I spent a lot of time working with the Google News Initiative on advising local media companies like Tampa Bay Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and others, and how they can use audience data to drive engagement and monetization on their digital platforms and build sustainable business models. And then I had a really unique opportunity to partner with an investment firm based out of Chicago and acquire PMP. And for those who are not familiar, PMP has been around for over 20 years. It was started by John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan. It started initially as a sort of network referral circle. It was kind of the promise was like learn the Morgan model for building your personal injury practice. It evolved into an advertising agency over the subsequent 10, 15 years. And then as Morgan & Morgan began to grow, it created some friction in our clients' markets, which created some challenge in the business, and his business partner was looking to retire. And I saw an opportunity to buy a really great business with a really great team in an exciting industry. And so I came on a little over 2 years ago, and I've been aggressively investing in the business and the infrastructure to improve our capabilities and our service offering, and also, frankly, to future-proof PMP for the future of personal injury law and advertising. Advertising is probably moving more quickly than personal injury law, but there are some macroeconomic trends that are affecting the industry, and I want to make sure we're staying ahead of those things on behalf of our clients. So with that said, I'll give you a brief spiel on PMP, but I don't want to spend too much time here. We're a full-service marketing firm. We'll help you build your digital presence. We do website services, so we'll build your website as a standalone. We'll add content marketing to it, post on your social media, do technical SEO for you, et cetera. We'll also craft a bespoke marketing strategy across platforms, linear TV, bus ads, paid social, paid search, whatever's right for your firm and your market based on your objectives and your budget. We certainly have some clients that overlap both. Some are just website, some are just advertising. But these are the things that are up here. They're interesting to talk about and learn about if you don't know about them, but they're just tactics and tools. We're accountable for growing our clients' case volumes. There's like a lot more to it than just the tactics and tools. What we're really doing is we're influencing people's behaviors so that they have a higher propensity to hire our clients after they get into an accident or are the victim of some act of negligence. So we spend a lot of time thinking about the consumer journey broadly as it relates to what happens after a motor vehicle accident, but before somebody hires an attorney. And so this sort of quest has led me into a lot of interesting conversations. One of them is with a former business school professor of mine. He's now at the University of Wisconsin. He focuses on brand asset management. And he turned me on to this book called The Organic Growth Playbook. Admittedly, it's like fairly academic and dry, not super interesting to like a broad audience, but it has a lot of really rich insights in here. And so this is what I wanted to share with you. The playbook approach is different than the conventional approach. The conventional approach would say, let's define our product or service and compare it and its differentiators relative to competition, highlight those differentiators through messaging to audience segments that are defined by sort of behaviors and demographics and things of that nature. The playbook approach would say, in a high competition, low differentiation marketplace, which I would contend personal injury law is one, and I say that as somebody who runs an advertising agency, which is also one. You spend a lot of money trying to differentiate based on very nominal differences between your competitors. A different way of thinking about it is understanding the journey or the habits or the behavior points that someone takes long before they get to your firm and try to influence them in a way that gives you greater leverage over their decision-making process and enhances the likelihood that they find your firm in your time of need, which sounds good conceptually, but may not make a lot of sense immediately. So I'm going to talk you through a case study here. Terafix is a drug. It's actually a pseudonym because it was an actual case study, and there's confidentiality with the clients. The drug solves a disease that is asymptomatic and mostly impacts women. Terafix had a handful of competitors. They were all aggressively marketing. Terafix was effective, and doctors knew this, but they saw their sales plateauing, so they needed to figure out what was going on. So they mapped what we call the buying process waterfall, the various paths that patients took before, during, and after their visit with their annual physicals, and they wanted to better understand what happened. What they found was doctors typically did qualitative self-assessments, but in some instances, they prescribed a really low-cost, low-cost diagnostic test. What they found was there was 4 times greater likelihood of a prescription for Terafix after an objective diagnostic test compared to one where there was a qualitative self-assessment. What was happening is people didn't know that they had this disease, but when they had the objective diagnostic test, they sought a prescription. It wasn't always Terafix. It might have been others, but in many cases it was. So the insight here is, how do we change the behavior of doctors to put in place an objective diagnostic test? And then also, how do we change the behavior of patients to request an objective diagnostic test? So they developed 2 different campaigns, one to doctors, one to the patients. Think about unbranded wellness. When you go to your doctor, ask for this test, targeted towards their target market of females of a certain age who may have a propensity to have this particular disease. They saw 60% more tests being taken place, And that led to a 9% increase in revenue on a $15 million decrease in marketing spend. That was year 1. In year 3, it was a 50% increase in revenue. So what I'm trying to say here is not that you guys should start pharmaceutical companies. What I'm saying is there are learnings from this that I believe can affect and impact and help frame how we think about personal injury law and marketing in personal injury law. So much so that I paid for and solicited a market research report based on this methodology to segment and understand the journey that someone takes and the various behaviors on that path to hiring an attorney so we can come up with insights that might help our clients. The prompt of the survey that we did, which went to over 1,000 people across the country, representative distribution across the country, across states, household incomes, ethnicities, age groups, and genders, started with, imagine you're in a car accident, there is damage to your car, but it is still drivable, your neck aches, you are not sure who is at fault. Now, this is the consistent framework we use to understand the journey. Anybody who's related to somebody in this room is going to go from car accident to hiring an attorney. Some people are going to skip through in different ways, but we need to have a universal framework to draw universal insights on how to think about this ambiguous marketplace. So it starts with solution identification. Many people don't know that they need an attorney after a car accident. They have to find out that they do need an attorney. Then they need to figure out what type of attorney. They may not know what personal injury is, how much it costs, or how they should evaluate the services. Then they do what we would call non-channel research. This is just outside of Google, basically, word of mouth type of conversations. Then they'll take to Google, and they'll search, and they'll research and select. Then they've got a handful of attorneys in mind. They're going to want to validate their decision and ultimately get in contact with one of them. Now, brace yourself. We blow that out into a much more in-depth view of the various behaviors that occur on this process map. Each one of these squares is a behavior that someone takes on their way to hiring an attorney. What we need to understand is what are the most common behaviors that people take so we can disproportionately focus on changing those behaviors to the benefit of our clients. So let's start at the beginning. First calls, just got in an accident, who am I calling? The police, the insurance company, a friend, family member, or colleague. The insurance company is before a friend, family member, or colleague, which is not good for us. How does that happen? It's because there's been decades of really focused messaging, educating the population that when you get in a car accident, you call your insurance company, you exchange that information. Hell, it's like in driver's ed. You know, the rhetorical question here is how do we get call your attorney in that top 3? But more specifically, moving on, within the first 2 weeks of an accident, how likely are you to contact an attorney? 45% are going to contact an attorney, 32% are not sure, 23% are not going to contact an attorney. There's one insight or idea that you leave with. It's this. This is a big problem, but also a big opportunity. Because 55% of people might not contact an attorney who have a compensable case. Our clients, understandably, are very focused on the other firms in their market with whom they're competing. People bidding on their names and things of that nature. I get the psychology of it, but this data would suggest that the biggest competitor is inaction. And just to put the hypothetical numbers on it, there's 5,000 accidents, compensable cases, 2,500 are actually going to get in contact with an attorney. Let's assume there's a 10% swing. That 45% who contact an attorney turns into 55%. That's 500 additional cases. In your market, it went from 2,500 to 3,000. That's a rising tide. So instead of duking it out at the finish line, trying to differentiate yourself from another firm that has maybe minimal differentiation, what if we think a little bit more upstream and try to change the behavior of people who may not contact an attorney? So who are these folks? It's helpful to know this. They're disproportionately female. They skew older, and they're largely white compared to the people who would contact an attorney. Now, what do we do with this data? We'd certainly want to dive deeper and get into the specifics of each market, but just as like a hypothetical, you might want to have a modest Facebook ad campaign targeted at women in your market, branded or unbranded, with various forms of messaging around immediately contact an attorney. Just focus on messaging the education of contact an attorney. Your first call after an accident is to contact an attorney. It's not we're the best or we're the toughest or anything like that. That's how you use this data and action upon it. So why aren't people contacting an attorney? We need to understand these behaviors so we can remove the behavior blockers and influence them to contact an attorney. I'm going to focus on the top 4 here, but I don't think I'd need an attorney. I wouldn't think to contact an attorney. I can't afford an attorney. I'd feel bad suing someone. These are not good reasons to not take action. They're based on misconceptions or lack of conception, which means that this is a solvable problem based on messaging and education. So how do these folks identify the fact that they need an attorney? What behaviors do they take? They're going to talk to people in their network largely. They're going to talk to a doctor, a physical therapist, a police officer. They might have a difficult experience with an insurance company, or they'll talk to a family member, friend, or colleague. These are the influencers in their lives who you want to build relationships with or communicate with to further the education process. So to draw this back to the concepts here in the playbook would say, invest in changing this behavior. Here are some strategies and tactics. Some you've already heard, but just different framing. Community engagement, doctors and physical therapists. Find your community, be very disciplined and focused about how you engage with that community. And also be very focused on the type of messaging. It may not be tell them to hire me. It's just, hey, you need to make sure whenever you have a patient, they should contact an attorney, whether it's me or not. Client relationships. Ken just said this. It's true. You guys just have a bunch of emails in your CRM that you should be actively using to communicate with your existing clients, because those friends, family members, and colleagues are your former clients. And then lastly, messaging. And this goes into paid advertising, content marketing, things of that nature. How can you influence your marketing to address this type of messaging and educate this audience? Case or no case is a thing we do with one of our clients. And the idea here is it's like not every case is going to be a massive case, and that's okay. People get intimidated sometimes when they see massive settlement numbers. It doesn't feel approachable. If I've just gotten in a car accident and I have a minor neck ache, that's not necessarily feeling actionable for an attorney who's talking about massive 8-figure, 9-figure settlements. Similarly, testimonials. We talk a lot about testimonials that are very emotional because it can be oftentimes very emotional, but maybe that's not the best from a creative standpoint all the time. Maybe a testimonial is, it was really easy to work with this firm. I didn't even know I need an attorney. I found out I did, thank God I did. It was easy. I texted them, we got in touch. The process was easy. It's not like I made a windfall out of this, and it's not about the windfall, it's about the process and how easy it was. You removed friction and dispelled the mythology about how difficult it might be to hire an attorney to a population who might be intimidated by attorneys. Now we move on. So these are people who know that they need an attorney, but they don't necessarily know what type. 73% of the general population do not know that they need to contact a personal injury lawyer. 20% of people said they would not contact an attorney because it's too expensive, despite the contingency fee model. And only 8% of the population knows that there is a no fee unless money is won pricing model for personal injury law. And this is despite massive amounts of messaging, no fee unless we win money. So what does that tell me? It's like that messaging is not working. So instead of saying we shouldn't try to deliver that message, because that message needs to be delivered, we should be changing how we deliver that message, using different verbiage, different vehicles, highlighting different things, talking about how easy it is, how free it is, how friendly it is. Some of the criteria that people think about when they're hiring an attorney: demonstrated experience with cases like mine, years of experience, prior client experience, that's social proof, ease of working with the law firm, and size of the law firm. Noted not on here, settlement amounts, the one who can get me the most money. I mean, while that's true, that was not one of the top choices here. It wasn't the toughest lawyer, or wasn't the most compassionate lawyer. It was these very practical elements of criteria to decide who would be the best lawyer to service them. And it's going to be different firm to firm. Your strengths are going to be different. Your identity as a firm and your brand identity is different. So how do these people find out what type of attorney, how much it costs, how they should evaluate? They're going to be contacting their insurance company. They're going to be contacting a friend, family member, or colleague, and they're Googling what to do in this situation. So this is the first time we really see Google in any meaningful way factoring into the decision-making process. This is what I mean about tools and tactics. They're just tools and tactics, but there's so much more that goes beyond the tools and tactics of, say, managing search. But with respect to managing search, this is an opportunity to think about long-tail keywords and blog content, because people are researching. If they're going to trust their insurance company, they might be going to insurance company blogs to understand about gap insurance or whatever issue they might be having an issue with. What if they found your blog instead? It's content rich, it's useful, you're helping them, and they're already in your environment, in your website. So this is why blog content, and well-written and thoughtful and well-researched blog content with a strategy matters, because it's an opportunity to siphon off the insurance company person who's going to go there, get sucked into their vortex, and not contact a great personal injury lawyer. I also want to just note, contact the police and contact doctor are actually much smaller or less common at this stage. This highlights that there's different psychology at different times in the process. Police are the first people they call at the time of accident. They might tell them they need an attorney, but they're not going to tell them which attorney to hire or anything like that. So you need to factor that into your thinking of how you engage with your referral networks, whether it's doctors in this case or not. But it is further meant to show that there's a difference in how people think about their needs at different points in the journey. As they think about non-channel research, this is sort of the next most important point, I think, to be made here. Most people, or a lot of people, are going to find an attorney through word of mouth. Either they know an attorney, they're a family member or a friend of somebody in this room, or they're going to contact a friend or colleague or whatever. So they're not necessarily addressable, as we'd call it, from advertising. They're not going to be influenced by marketing. So you need to cordon off that part of the population and assume that they're not addressable and focus on the part of the population that is addressable. We did a little double clicking into some of the questions. There was low amounts of certainty in some areas that they would actually end up hiring an attorney through a relationship. So we found the number to be roughly 60% of the general population who are looking for an attorney are what we would consider an addressable audience or somebody who'd be influenced by marketing. Now we get into the actual search process. And to be clear, that 23% of the people is for this part of the journey. The vast majority of people are going to take to the internet to either validate or do some other action in the process. This is specifically just, I need an attorney, I need a personal injury attorney, these are the things that I think matter, so I'm going to type in some stuff into Google and try to find some people who I think can help me. That's who this person is. So they're Googling attorneys in general. They're Googling for resources about car accidents, insurance companies, neck injuries. These top two, this is where the long tail keyword stuff really works because they're researching, they're trying to learn, they're trying to build trust. They look at reviews of attorneys. We've talked about this before. It's important. We know this. I want to come back to this, that 13% review of attorney. Resources on how to find the right attorney, like we have to remember, we think about this all day long. It's obvious to us. It's like, I don't even know how to find an attorney. So how can we develop content that's helped them there? And then what's interesting here is an attorney I've already heard of is 4%. And this is, it's possibly true. I would argue, though, it's a flaw in the methodology because this is stated behavior versus observed behavior. The statistic there at the bottom is based on studies that have done that 82% of searchers choose a familiar brand for the first click. So when they're choosing between a couple of different links in Google, one they kind of recognize a little bit, one they don't at all, they are almost always going to go for the one they recognize a little bit. So whether they came across a blog and saw your logo, they saw your billboard, whatever the case may be, That's where this stuff comes back to get you a competitive edge over your competitors. Now they want to validate the decision. They're going to take certain sets of behaviors to say, are these the right people I should be reaching out to? I said, remember the Google reviews? It was 14% on the previous slide, because when people are looking for an attorney, they don't necessarily start with the Google reviews. They've already identified that they want to hire you, then they're going to go to the Google reviews. That's the context, that's the lens through which they're mostly looking at your Google reviews as a factor in their process. So keep that in mind. There are these other elements, independent third parties. Most bar associations are going to have lawyer referral services. There's fine laws and other things out there. But I think the key takeaway here is Google reviews, major needle mover as they're validating it, and worth your time and energy to get right. Maybe more so than social media, getting a really dialed in social media strategy. The last phase here is visit, contact the firm. I'd be curious to see what your intake data says and how that would match to this. How do people like to get in contact with you? It might be a function of what you make available to them. We looked at our client data and found a pretty similar distribution. Most people like to call. That's what we like. It's one less factor of friction in the process. Next, we've got contact forms. Next, we've got live chat. If you're not offering live chat or your contact forms are broken, you're missing out on this population. You're missing the opportunity to influence this behavior to your benefit. But most importantly here, 76% of people are likely to contact multiple attorneys. So intake matters. Now, stated behavior versus observed behavior. If they call your firm and you've got a kick-ass intake, you're going to sign them up immediately. They're not going to fish around for others. So there is an opportunity to stem the process there and convert them into clients. And there's going to be an abundance of content around intake, but just another data point to reinforce that it's worth your time and energy to get it right. So this is really dense, and I'll make this available to you, but I just want to re-summarize sort of the general map here. These are the percentages laid over it. And as you recall, I said you want to first start with how common these behaviors are. Then you want to decide where do you have the most point of influence or most leverage to change a common behavior to your advantage. It depends on your goals, objectives, your budget capacity. One outcome might look like, you know what, I'm not going to focus on everything. I really shouldn't. I have limited resources and time and energy. I'm going to focus on a couple of things. Laser focused, disproportionately focused. I see that doctors are a key part of the funnel as it relates to letting people know that they should hire or contact an attorney. I'm going to really hustle down a smart referral network. I'm going to put together a list, and I'm going to be very diligent about massaging those relationships and being clear to them what they should be communicating to their patients. Next, I'm going to really focus on blog content. I'm going to be really dialed in. I want to siphon off a lot of those people who would otherwise be going to an insurance company. I want to give them content that's useful, solves their questions, hopefully puts them directed towards me. Next, I'm going to be really militant about my Google reviews. I'm going to, it's awkward. I hate, it's uncomfortable to ask for a Google review. But no, I'm going to, sign up with Bird Eye. I'm going to incentivize my staff with gift cards. I'm going to be militant about responding to Google reviews. I'm going to be really diligent because I can get a lot of leverage at the validation phase, and it's worth my time as an input because the return on that time is going to be so valuable. And lastly, I'm going to be really smart about my intake, and I'm going to be uncompromising about errors in my intake. So you've got 4 things to be really good at. I'm making this up, but whatever capacity you have in your firm, focus that on the areas where you think you can get most leverage based on your strengths and where you see the opportunity. Now, this has been kind of like academic and conceptual, but I want to tie this back to the real world and give you some examples of this coming to life. And I don't pretend to say that they've done this study and know this. It's just like I'm inferring this to draw out some of the parallels of what I'm saying. I was in LA a couple months ago. I saw this billboard on, I think, the 405, Jacoby and Myers. It's a search bar, best car accident lawyers in California. They are trying to use brand awareness marketing to change behaviors, to take an action, to go to search if you need an attorney. And wouldn't you know it, Jacoby & Myers ranks for all the key search terms, and they're heavy on pay-per-click and LSAs. They're dialed in. It's a capability that they've built that they're strong at. They're using another part of their marketing strategy to point people's behaviors to go there because they know they'll win. Expanding the market, Morgan & Morgan. They have a theme of these types of ads. This one is canceling your gym membership is hard, hiring Morgan & Morgan for your injury is easy. People don't like friction in engaging in any product or service. What we're doing here, and the ad, it's got levity, it's not scary, it's not a white guy in a suit like being intimidating. It's friendly, it's funny, it's got graphics that point to devices, mobile devices, and it's about being easy. They're expanding the market and talking to people who might not otherwise contact an attorney. So, 3 just general takeaways, because again, this is very dense, I realize that. Leave with this knowing 50% of people are not going to contact an attorney. Have a really smart content strategy. The days of set it and forget it TV campaigns are over. You need different messaging, different creative, different platforms for different audiences. If you really want to be surgical and smart, lean and mean and get the most out of your advertising campaign. Network matters. Get out in the community, no matter how hard it might be. Be deliberate, pick your lanes, build relationships with the communities where you think you've got most leverage, most opportunity, and most connection, so you can educate and evangelize your services, demystify what it's like to work with an attorney, and then pick your spot. Not everybody in here has got a Morgan & Morgan. In fact, I'd venture to say that nobody in here has a Morgan & Morgan marketing budget. But the idea is there's various marketing budgets, sizes of law firms, objectives, what you want out of your law firm. Not everybody is trying to be the biggest. It's the lifestyle you create for yourself. So you need to pick your lanes, what matters to you, and be really diligent and focused. Where people get into trouble is they spread their strategy too thin, they're trying to do too many things at once, and they dilute the efficacy of every single thing that they do. So be smart, deliberate, and then most importantly, stick with it. Have the discipline to stick with it and have conviction in the strategic decision you're making for your firm. So with all this said, I'm happy to talk about marketing tactics and what we would do, but I thought it'd be most useful to come in here and try to encourage at least a few of you to maybe think about your marketing a little bit differently. The landscape is changing. It's a lot more competitive in personal injury law. There are a lot more platforms to advertise on. To be doing the same thing and expecting similar results is foolish. So you need to be disciplined, thoughtful, and thinking about your marketing in the 30,000-foot view. I get being obsessed with CPC and rankings, and those things certainly matter. But it's false precision if you don't have a smart, overarching strategy, and if you don't understand the physical world that your clients walk through to find you. So with that said, we're about at time, but I appreciate your time today. We'll make this available. I'm happy to have a conversation. There's a lot more data that underpins this too, by market, by demographic. You can slice it in really interesting ways. We just got this, so I wanted to summarize it for the purposes of this discussion today. But there will be more to come, and I'm happy to go deeper with anybody who'd like to have that conversation. Thank you. Appreciate it.